Hey there, it's Dr. Utter. Today is April the 8th, 2013, and this video is an update to the ongoing divergence story. That is the divergence between silver's demand and its price. In the past, it has followed along very closely between the price and the demand. For example, when the price goes up, people buy, and when the price goes down, the market cools off and people don't buy. I've noted in the past that this trend has continued up to and including 2012, but in 2013 the price has been dropping and yet the demand has been skyrocketing. So that's what's being called the Drutter divergence in some circles, and I'm going to do an update video on that right now. I'm going to put a link or two down below so that you can get caught up on this whole divergence thing. If you haven't been following it as it's been coming out on my channel and other places, you may want to check that out because a lot of this video probably won't make much sense to you going forward if you haven't seen that in the past. Okay, so here's the old chart. We want something like this when we're done. And this time we're going to be doing January, February, March, and April's data. So we're getting 1/3 of a year instead of 1/4 of a year into these numbers. So we're going to need to add to this here. We're going to need, let's say, 20 million eagles total on this scale on the left. Back to the data now, we're looking at 2013, but we can go back and look at something else like, say, 2000. That's where we start our chart. Scroll down to silver, and so we're going to add January, February, March, and April for each year. And then for 2013, the current year, that's where it gets a little tricky because we have only part of April reporting and we have to extrapolate that out. It becomes even more tricky this time, though. There is some speculation that the Mint may be fudging some numbers. I believe they are. I don't think the U.S. government deserves any benefit of the doubt. And it's just way too convenient for them the way that they updated as the clock struck midnight basically on April 1st. They added 812,000 eagles to their April data when no sales could have happened yet in April. So I was pretty sure, and I still am, that those 812,000 belong in March. So what we could do is separate those 812,000 out and put them on the March numbers, and then use the remaining 833,000, that is the 833,000 eagles sold so far in April, as the basis for calculating the April's extrapolated numbers. Now, of course, we have to bring in a calculator, and we have 8 days so far in April that have been used up. Divide that by the total number of days in April, that's 30. The reciprocal of that, 3.75. Now multiply that by 1.645 million, which is supposedly what's been sold in April so far, and that means you'll get about 6.1 or 6.2 million as your total for April. The previous April record was 2.8 million, and that was set in 2011, right as the price spiked to $50, and it was basically the most frenzied time for buying silver eagles there ever was. So to beat the record by 3 times shows that this is impossible. It's not impossible, but it would show that, the silver market has come unhinged completely. Maybe it has, but let's just assume that things are going along with business as normal, and that number can't be correct. So indeed, those 812,000 that they put in April's numbers at the very beginning of the month don't belong in April. Those were March's numbers. So we can either leave them in April or take them out of April, to put them into March. It won't really matter because we're calculating January through the end of April anyway, so it's all going to extrapolate out to the same. It's just that leaving them here on the April numbers means we're going to get an incredibly high number for our April extrapolation, 6.2, and that's impossible. So we're going to be conservative, and we're going to put those 812,000 fraudulent April numbers and put them where they belonged, which was in March. And then we can calculate out April's numbers. So let's do that now. 1.645 minus the 812,000 that they put in there, and that's 0.833 or 833,000. And let's just extrapolate that out and see what we would get for April. So we would multiply that by 30 and divide that by 8. And you get a more reasonable number of 3.1 million. Yes, that's bigger than the all-time April record of 2.8 million, but that's what we expect because we've had an all-time record January, an all-time record February, and once we put those numbers where they belong, an all-time record March. So of course we're going to be having an all-time record April. There's nothing that's been changing sales over the past couple of weeks that I'm aware of. Sales continue to be at a fever pitch pretty much. So yeah, we are expecting a record April. Instead of 2.8 million, we're going to be doing about 3.1. So we are going to be besting our 2011 numbers and having an all-time record April, just as we have had the other 3 months of the year. So we will use that 3.1 million figure, and we'll add that 3.1 million to the 7.5 in January, the 3.4 in February, and then the 3.3 plus the 0.8, so 4.1 from March. And we'll get a total January, February, March, April figure, which we can then use to compare against the previous January, February, March, April totals from the years from 2000 to 2013. I'm going to run those numbers right now on screen just to make sure everyone's following along. And so we'll do the April numbers first. For April we have 0.833. That's this figure minus the phantom 812,000 that appeared on April 1st. And multiply that by the number of days in the month, divide by the number of days that have already happened, and we get 3.12, the projected total for March. Add that 3.12 to the phantom 812.812 for March, and then we'll add March, so plus 3.3565 plus February 3.3685 plus January 7.498, and we get a projected total from January through April of 2013 of 18.16 million Silver Eagles sold. And then we just plug the data in and generates a chart. So the price, of course, is taken from the high each year, and I divide by a conversion factor to get them onto the same chart. I don't have fancy chart analysis where I can just overlay a chart on top of here. That would be nice, but I don't have that right now. So I just use this. And the conversion factor for this one was 3.27 in case anyone's trying to replicate this exact chart. And what does this chart tell us? Well, it tells me that this divergence is still very much in play. A very large gap between demand and price in 2013, where it has been following incredibly closely in the past few years. There have been other times when the two diverge, as you can see. For example, here, as Mike Maloney pointed out in his presentation on this, here preceded a very large price move. So the demand increased where the price had still not increased, and then the price caught up here. So, as Mike Maloney was saying, perhaps this is the sign of another huge move up in price. We can't predict anything based on this, of course. That's just one possibility. And we can go and look at the previous version, which was done halfway through March or so. Right there. I'll just flip back and forth. That's the new one, old, old. So as you can see, really nothing much is changing. The data is slightly different because we've added in April now. So in the green line will move slightly, as you can see, based on the differences in Aprils over the past 14 years. But the conclusion is the divergence is still certainly in play, if not getting wider, if not getting more pronounced as more data comes rolling in and confirms that this is indeed happening. Demand is, literally off the chart here once again. And our price, we've still not broken that 32 for the year. In fact, now we're down even lower. We're down, down in here. And yet demand is moving even further up. So this is just getting more and more striking. And it's certainly something to keep an eye on and something that I'm going to be following over the next several videos. And hopefully the Mint doesn't pull any more shenanigans, but if they do, we will just manually adjust their data and have it make sense again. And of course we could further analyze this data and this chart and draw some more conclusions from it. For example, if we were to say, what would happen this year if the chart followed along like it did in 2011 and 2012? What if the price in 2013 has just lagged behind for the first few months of the year? What if it's going to catch up? And what if this is going to end up here? What is the corresponding price? Well, that would be over $60 an ounce. One thing I personally draw from this, though, is that something's got to give. Talk to you guys soon.